Hello again, everyone. I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I am building the Chaser by Estes. This is another one of their E2X or easy to assemble kits that generally goes together in less than an hour. Now this one I think is currently out of production. This is one I got as part of a ding and dent sale that Estes had. The packaging says it's from 2015. And I don't know whether this is still going in the current catalog. Regardless, we're going to build it anyway. Okay, so this is a little bit of a thicker rocket than a lot of the E2X kits are. Alright, let's get our instructions out and make sure that we have all of the parts. Alright, so we've got a pre-colored purple body tube. We have a decal sheet. Alright, nose cone. A small parts package, and this should include just about everything else here. So this has the fins, the fin can, or fin unit, launch lug, shock cord, motor retainer. Alright, and we've got a parachute here. Alright, someplace, oh there it is. Okay, so that clear sticker in there, that is for reinforcing the launch lug. Okay, so it looks like we have everything, and I'll clear this away and we will get started. Our first task is to assemble the fin assembly here, and this is a little bit different from most of the E2X kits that use this type of an assembly in that they've already got pre-installed fins for two of them, and so this is going to go together like this. There we go. Okay, and then the other two fins will go on here. This is actually a really neat idea, because what this does is it eliminates a stress point that would normally go at the seams here. So typically with a 4-fin rocket with this type of a plastic fin can, you end up having to insert a fin along a seam where the two halves went together, and that's a weak point. So this is actually a really nice way to do this. I like it. Alright, they're showing using a tube type cement like this, which you can use. But I prefer the control that I have with a brush-on cement. So this is kind of a medium viscosity, not quite as thick as the tube type, but not entirely runny. And so what we're going to do here is take 1/2, and I'm going to use the peg side. It really doesn't matter which half you do. And I'm going to run some cement here on all of the surfaces that are going to articulate with the other half. So basically all the edges. Now if you're using a brush-on cement, you can actually use the really runny kind, the low viscosity. But the drawback to that one is it dries really quickly, and sometimes it dries before you're ready for it. Alright, now along here, I get right along the base of this fin. If you overshoot and get some up in here, like I just went too far forward, just let it dry. Okay, this stuff does not really show up at all once it dries. Unless you try and go and wipe it off and smear it, then it's really obvious. Alright, so we're going to put these two together. I'm going to hold these for about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to let it dry for about 10 minutes before we go on to the other two fins. While the fin assembly is drying, I'm going to move on to the next step here and get ready to attach the launch lug. Now the first thing they have us do is make a line down the length of the body tube here. And you can do this on a door frame, but since door frames don't fit under my camera very well, you can also use this tube marking guide that Estes makes. This is actually one of the best rocket aids I've come across. It's just really handy. I'm going to take a pencil now and make a very fine line here. It doesn't need to be dark. In fact, the fainter the better, as long as you can still see it. Alright, and that is very faint. I don't even know if you can see that on there. But it's mostly just a slight indentation rather than the graphite of the pencil there. That's fine. Okay, from the aft end, and I'm going to go ahead and mark aft on here. It's the rear part. That way I don't get my tube switched around later. Okay, so we need a measurement of 1.5 inches. Make sure I got my line here. There it is. Alright. So at 1.5 inches, this is where the aft end of the launch lug will go. Alright, and now I'm going to take the launch lug here, and we're going to mark this by pressing it. So it's got two little knobs on the other underside. One of those is going to go at my mark that I just made. The other one will be ahead of it. So the first thing I need to do is just make sure that this is in line with the line that I drew. Alright, now for this edge here, I can press against my finger inside the tube. For the forward part, it's a little trickier there. Alright, but what we're doing is just making a little dent here. And then we're going to take a hobby knife and cut a cross section there. Okay, so there's my first mark. I'm cutting about 1/8 of an inch on either side of that indentation. Okay, about the same here. Okay, now I'm going to check this again, so that those little nubbins should go in where I've cut them now. Okay, that one's good. That one's good. Alright, now they're showing using the tube type cement again. Here, because we have dissimilar surfaces, I like to use super glue gel. You can also use the medium viscosity brush on cement. I think this is the last job for this tube. Alright, and then preferably without gluing your fingers to the rocket, we're going to go ahead and put this back on. Alright, squishing everything back down into those holes. Just be careful you don't collapse the body tube at this point. And then we're going to take this. This is just a little square stick-on. And this is going to act as a reinforcement here. Because the main thing we have to worry about is more of a lateral force than a vertical one. You know, if you get a windy day and this is on the launch pad, we don't want it to rip the launch lug off. Okay, so here what I'm doing is once I've got it positioned, I'm smoothing down the top, and I'm going to use a fingernail to get into the corners here, and then smooth it out from there. And this just helps prevent having a line of air bubbles right next to it. Okay, and then we'll let this dry. Coming back to our fin assembly, we can now add the other two fins. And with this, they're showing the tube type cement again. And again, if you want to use a medium viscosity brush on, that is also fine. Okay, now we don't want a whole lot. We want an even amount here. And I'm going to hit this surface. I'm not getting the very tip. You can. I'm just a little worried that it may just make a mess. But basically any place there's this flat part, Alright, and then the sides of these tabs, that's where we want it. And this should just plug right in. Yeah, okay, so this is what I was worried about here, is this doesn't actually articulate with anything, so there's no use putting glue on it. In fact, that glue may interfere with adding this to the body tube. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. Okay, again, the flat surfaces, but not the edge up there. Okay, put that one on, and then once more we're going to set this aside to dry for a few minutes. While we're waiting for glue to dry, we'll go ahead and prepare the nose cone and the parachute. Now, the only thing we have to do with the nose cone here is there's often this little bit of plastic inside the eyelet. We call it flash. And so you can just take a hobby knife and carefully cut that away. But don't cut this part off. That's where the parachute and shock cord are going to attach. Okay, so we'll just set that up. Then we're going to get our parachute here. Now there are two ways to do this. You can either tie the parachute directly to the nose cone, which is what the instructions show, or you can use a snap swivel, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. Alright, go ahead and lay out the parachute face down, and then gather up all of the loops of the shroud lines here. So there should be 3 loops there. Alright, just hang that around a finger of your dominant hand. On your other hand, take the center of the parachute sheet. Okay, and now you can adjust the tension on the shroud lines as well as kind of slipping this back and forth until all of those corners are about in the same position. Alright, once they are, go ahead and keep tension up here. Alright, and bring those shroud line loops all together just like that. Okay, you're going to push those through here. Got one more. Come on. There we go. Alright, so once you've got those through, go ahead and reform the loops. Alright, recheck that everything's still where it's supposed to be. Okay, and then you can put the parachute through the loops, and then you pull it down tight, and that will make a nice little clean knot on the nose cone there. Alright, now I prefer to be able to change my parachutes quickly, and so I'm going to use a snap swivel. Okay, so you can find these snap swivels just about in any place that you find fishing supplies. The size doesn't really matter as long as it freely moves on the nose cone eyelet there and does not get hung up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have to reform this. Alright, so once again, I'm going to take all my shroud line loops here. Okay, bring this together. Adjust the length as necessary there. Alright, now my snap swivel has 2 ends. At one end is the swivel, and so this allows it to move independently. And ideally this helps prevent twisting of your shroud lines. In practice it doesn't really do a whole lot, but it does allow you to switch things. So we have the snap on this end. This is what's going to attach to the nose cone, and this allows us to move parachutes in and out really quickly. Alright, so now you're going to take the loops like we did before, but we're going to stick those through the swivel end here in the same way that we did directly to the nose cone. Alright, I'm going to open those up again. Once more, I'm going to check my length and my tension, and I just lost one there. Try it again. Alright, so you can adjust that as needed. If If you've got it where you want it, then go ahead and take the swivel. Okay, and you're going to pass the swivel up through the loops while you're pulling the loops down, like that. And then you're just going to pull that tight, and that'll form a nice little knot there. One more check. All right, looks like one of the shroud lines moved a little bit, but it's still fine. All right, if you don't like it, you can loosen this and try again. Once you've got it the way you want it, then take a little bit of wood glue or white glue and put that right on the knot. You can do this if you tied it directly to the nose cone as well. And this just helps keep those from slipping and accidentally untying itself. Okay, now this is where the size actually matters, is this part needs to be able to move freely around the nose cone. Okay, so if I open that up, I can put that through, close that, and that clip should be big enough that it can move freely around here. If it's too small, it can lock in a position like this, which can interfere with deployment of the parachute. So this is fine. All right, and this also allows me to change this out. So a lot of Rocketeers don't like to store parachutes in their rockets. All right, and so they can just do this and have a box of parachutes. Also, if you've got a windier day and you want this to come down a little faster, you could switch out this parachute, which I believe is 15 inches, with, say, a 12-inch parachute. All right, I'm going to set this aside for just a little bit. Now it's time to join the fin unit to the body tube. And so here, the instructions are using the tube type cement again. I do want to just put this on with a dry fit, make sure everything goes where it's supposed to, because those fin tips do kind of get in the way of things. There we go. Alright, so when we put this on, the two of the fins should be on either side of the launch lug. We don't want it like this, where the fin can interfere with the launch lug when it's on the launch pad. Alright, now again, your instructions are showing the tube type cement there. And once again, I'm going to use a gel type super glue. Some people like to use epoxy here. If you're familiar with using epoxy, you can. This is low power motors again. You're not going to have that much stress on it. So it's kind of up to you. I've had the most failures using the tube type cement, as it's really meant to bond plastic to plastic. Alright, so here I'm going to take my super glue gel. I'm just going to put a bead of glue just inside the edge of the body tube there. Okay, again, we're going to put this on, get all those tips to line up. Whoop. Uh-oh. Apparently that fin was not quite glued yet. There we go. Okay, now we're going to move this back and forth to seat it in the glue. Pop that fin back on where it belongs. Okay, and I can feel it's kind of loose in there. So this is another thing. If you use the gel type super glue, it's a little bit better at filling little voids. The regular super glue will just absorb into the cardboard and it won't hold anything. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just let this whole thing dry now for about 15 minutes. The glue on the fin can has dried, and so now we're ready to install the shock cord. We'll need to cut out the shock cord mount here on the front page. If you don't want to destroy your instructions, go ahead and just make a photocopy of this and then cut that out. And you'll want a disposable surface to work on because we're going to get really messy with glue here. So typically the way these go together is that we'll pretty much smear this whole thing with glue, get a nice even coating all over it. And then the typical way is you put the shock cord over the 2 and the 3 like this into the glue. You fold the 1 over the 2 and the 2 over the 3. The problem with doing it that way is it gives you this sitting right on top of this, so you get a double thickness of the rubber there, and that makes a little bulge inside your body tube that can sometimes cause the parachute to hang up and not deploy properly. There are 2 ways that I know of to fix this. One is that you mount this at an angle so that now when the 2 folds over the 3, this rubber sets next to this one and you only have 1 thickness. My new favorite way of doing this, and one of my viewers mentioned this to me, is to cut about 1 inch lengthwise to make a forked end there. And then when we put this on here, at the 2 point, we open that fork, and when we fold the 2 over the 3, the 2 forks will go on either side of the main part of the shock cord there. So now we need some white glue or wood glue. And we're going to put a healthy bead on here. It's kind of clogged. There's a fancy glue bottle and it clogs up just as often as the regular ones do. Alright, now we're just going to take a finger and smear this uniformly. Okay, we want to get glue all over the paper so it can stick to itself well. Alright, now we're going to take our forked end here. Alright, now we're going to fold the 1 over the 2. Okay, and then squish all the air out of there as best you can. And then the 2 over the 3. About like that. Okay, and then we're going to add some more glue here. Alright, and then I've folded this into a bit of a curvature there, and so the convex side of this is what's going to get glued up against the inside of the body tube here. So I'm going to slide that in and turn it over, and this needs to be at least 1.5 inches down. If you've got long fingers, go ahead and put it further down. Alright, and then we're going to squash this up against the inside of the body tube. I'm using my hand to apply pressure from the other side so I don't buckle the tube. Okay, so if you look down in there, and I don't know if I can quite get this at the right angle, but that's nicely pressed up against the body tube. There are no big bulges or anything like that in it. Over on the other end here, we're going to slide this through the opening. Now this little opening is going to get kind of crowded. Because we're also, if you tied the parachute directly on, it's already in your way there, which is another advantage to using the snap swivel. But that snap swivel is going to have to fit in there as well. So, like I say, it's going to get a little bit crowded. Alright, tie a double knot here, or 2 half hitches. Alright, cinch that down and pull it from all directions. Once you've got it there, go ahead and put just a little dot of the white glue or wood glue on there like we did with the parachute shroud lines. And that'll just help keep it from coming undone. And then cut back the free end to about 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch. Don't cut it all the way to the knot because it'll go through, but by cutting it short like this, it prevents it from getting caught between the nose cone shoulder here and the body tube. and that's a really common way that recovery systems fail. Alright, I'm going to let all this glue dry for about 20 minutes here, and then we'll come back and put the whole thing together. Now that all the glue has dried, we're ready to put all this together. So if you tied your chute directly onto the nose cone, that's already done by now. If you're using this method, go ahead and attach your snap swivel. Alright, and it's going to overlap the shock cord here, that's fine. Right, turn this around. Now if you're prepping this for launch, add about 5 sheets, maybe even 6 of recovery wadding to this first, and then add everything else. Otherwise, if you're just storing this, you can do it the same way. Now some people like to store their parachutes separately, and that's one of the advantages of the snap swivel there. So what I've done is first folded this in half so that all of the corners overlap. And I'm just going to fold each set of corners into the middle one. Okay, so fold it like that, and then I'm going to fold this over so that now all the corners are stacked on top of each other, and we've got this kind of a flying wedge here. Alright, take the shroud lines, find about the halfway point there, and you're going to move that up onto the parachute sheet middle, like that. Okay, and then we're going to fold the edges over, so there and then there. Now we've got kind of a spike going here. Take the vertex of the spike and put it down onto the corners, like that. And then we're just going to fold in the outer edges and finally over itself so that we've got this fairly long cylinder. Okay, now we're going to stuff the shock cord in, and this doesn't require anything fancy, just stuff it in there. Okay, once you got most of that in, go ahead and slide the parachute in, and this should go really easily. If it's catching on something, see if you're got a bulge in your shock cord mount or something else is folded wrong. Alright, and then add the nose cone. That should slip easily in. Alright, if it's really hard getting the nose cone in, probably it means you've got something caught between the shoulder and the body tube. Check that and make sure. If it's still really tight, then you may have to take this out, sand it with some 100 grit sandpaper, but only a little bit at a time. Alright, until it gets to the point where that goes in fairly easily. Turn it upside down and shake it, and it should not come out. Okay, now if it does start slipping out, then just put a little masking tape around it, and I'm going to try that again. Yeah, I had my shock cord caught there. Alright, so if it's really loose like that, take some masking tape and start with about half of a circumference here. So I'm just going to add to the shoulder. Alright, we're not taping the nose cone on, we're just giving it a little more thickness there. Alright, put everything back down again, put that on, another shake test. Okay, so it shouldn't be coming off, but you should be able to pull it out with just a little bit of force. Now keep in mind that humidity and temperature changes can change how this all goes together. So always check this before every flight. It may not be the same from day to day, week to week, month to month. Our last task is to apply the decals. These are self-adhesive. Now something to keep in mind, something I've found is that as these decals age, either on the rocket or still in a kit, they don't stick as well. And I've had a lot of trouble with that, especially on these out of production kits, simply because the decals are old. Okay, now if that happens where it starts peeling up on the edges, you can try putting a little bit of regular viscosity super glue, just a really thin film on that, and press that back down. I found it works about half the time. Okay, sometimes you may just want to say, well, you know, for example, this kit's 10 years old. You may want to decide that I'm just going to use different decals or none at all. Okay, now we can refer to the packaging here. Alright, so the broken stripes here, that's just meant to go down one side. This is a wrap to go around just above the fins, and then we've got the two chaser decals here. Those are meant to go on the fin can. You can put them wherever you want. Okay, I'm pretty sure that if I put this one on, it's just going to peel up again, so I'm not going to use it. Okay, but I will use this one. Okay, now the trick with these guys is that you don't want to get them pressed on and then lift them up again, so they'll pull the color off. Now I'm just noticing here that our launch lug is in the way of this decal. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'll put it up above it. So I'm going to start it here, and I'm going to use the launch lug as a guide. Pretty much you got one shot at this, so I'm just going to go for it. Oh, okay, so they do have a gap here. Well, I've already put it on. Now you've learned from my mistake that this is not a complete wrap. It actually does go up to the launch lug. Okay. Alright. So I'm going to put these on the... Ooh, there we go. I'm going to put these on the sides of the fin can, so that my launch lug is in the middle of the two of them there. So I'll put it on that side and that side, and I'm going to call those good. Alright, and then the final thing to do, whether you're just putting this away or putting a motor in it, is to put the retaining clip in there, turn that about halfway around. Okay, and so here, from tip to fins, is my chaser. I hope you had a good time building this with me. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.